Nobody taught you to rock your baby. Nobody handed you a manual and said, sing to this child or hold them against your skin. You just did it. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you've probably wondered whether any of it actually matters, or whether you're just going through the motions of something that feels good, but does nothing. Here's what neuroscience has spent the last 3 decades quietly discovering. You were right, every single time. The rocking, the singing, the face you make when your baby makes a face back at you. There is a precise biological mechanism behind every one of those instincts. Your nervous system was running calculations your conscious mind never had access to. And the research that explains why is some of the most beautiful science I've ever come across. Stay with me through this one, because the last instinct on this list is the one most parents dismiss as just being silly. It turns out it's one of the most cognitively complex things a human being can do for another human being's developing brain. You've never needed to think about rocking. The moment a baby is upset, your arms start moving, back and forth, side to side, sometimes in a gentle bounce. It's so automatic that parents do it even when they're not holding a baby, standing in a grocery store, arms empty, still swaying. That's not a quirk. That's your nervous system remembering. But here's what's actually happening inside that baby's brain when you rock them. The vestibular system, the sensory network housed in the inner ear that governs balance, spatial orientation, and movement, is one of the first sensory systems to develop in utero. By around 16 weeks of gestation, a fetus is already responding to the rhythmic motion of the mother's body as she walks. For 9 months, movement was the default state. Stillness was the anomaly. When you rock a newborn, you are not introducing something new. You are continuing something ancient. Vestibular stimulation has been shown to reduce heart rate, lower respiratory rate, and decrease cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, in infants. The rocking motion activates the cerebellum, which is not just responsible for motor coordination, but plays a documented role in emotional regulation. Researchers studying premature infants in neonatal intensive care units have observed that gentle rhythmic movement accelerates weight gain and improves sleep architecture, 2 markers of neurological health. But there's something even more elegant happening. Rocking is rhythmic, and rhythm at its core is prediction. Every rock forward, every rock back is a tiny promise the parent makes to the baby's nervous system. The world is regular. The world is safe. The world follows patterns you can trust. That is not a metaphor. That is literally how the brain builds its threat detection architecture, by learning what is predictable and filing everything else as potential danger. You were teaching your baby that the world is trustworthy. You were doing it with your arms without knowing a single word of neuroscience. If you've ever rocked a baby and felt like it was the most natural thing you've ever done in your life, drop a 1 in the comments, because you are not imagining that feeling. Your body knew something your textbooks never told you. Here's something strange to sit with. Every human culture on earth, across every recorded history, sings to its babies. Isolated tribes with no contact with the outside world, ancient civilizations, modern cities, every single one. That kind of universality in human behavior is not a coincidence. It is a signal. Evolution does not preserve behaviors that don't serve survival. So what is infant-directed singing actually doing? The first thing to understand is that babies don't just hear your singing. They process it differently than they process speech. Neuroimaging research has shown that music activates a broader network of brain regions simultaneously than spoken language does, including areas governing emotion, memory, motor planning, and auditory processing. When you sing to your baby, you are essentially running a full brain workout through sound alone. But infant-directed singing, what researchers call mother-ease in its musical form, has specific acoustic properties that distinguish it from regular singing. Parents instinctively raise their pitch, slow their tempo, exaggerate their melodic contour, and repeat phrases more than they would in adult-directed song. They do this without instruction, and infants, even newborns, show measurable preference for this style over regular adult singing within the first days of life. What those acoustic properties do is fascinating. The slower tempo gives the developing auditory cortex more processing time per note. The exaggerated pitch contour makes emotional content more legible. The baby can read the emotional meaning of the sound before they can decode a single word. The repetition builds prediction circuits. The elevated pitch triggers heightened attention. And there's a bonding layer beneath all of this that is easy to miss. Singing requires breath. Breath requires calm. When you sing to a baby, your own nervous system is regulating. You cannot sustain a lullaby while you're in panic mode. Your baby, through a mechanism called physiological co-regulation, reads your regulated nervous system and begins to mirror it. The song is the mechanism. Your calm is the medicine. If you've ever noticed that singing to your baby seemed to calm you as much as it calmed them, you weren't imagining it. That was co-regulation working in both directions. This one has the most dramatic research behind it, and I want to give it the weight it deserves. In the 1970s and 80s, two Colombian physicians, Edgar Ray Sanabria and Hector Martinez Gomez, were working in a Bogota hospital that didn't have enough incubators for its premature infants. Out of necessity, they began placing premature babies directly on their mothers' chests for extended periods. What they observed changed neonatal medicine permanently. The babies survived at rates that defied expectation. They gained weight faster. They regulated their temperatures more effectively. Their breathing stabilized. What became known as kangaroo mother care is now a globally recommended intervention for premature infants, not as a last resort, but as a first-line treatment. But the neuroscience behind why it works reaches deeper than survival statistics. Skin-to-skin contact triggers a cascade of oxytocin release in both parent and infant. Oxytocin is not just the love hormone in the greeting card sense. It is an active neurochemical that suppresses the amygdala's threat response, reduces cortisol, promotes myelination of neural pathways, and plays a direct role in the development of the social brain. When your skin touches your baby's skin, you are literally bathing their developing neural architecture in a compound that makes brain wiring go better. The warmth regulation piece is equally remarkable. A mother's chest has been documented to adjust its temperature in response to the baby's needs, warming when the baby is cold, cooling when the baby is warm, with a precision that no incubator has matched. The body knows. It has always known. For fathers doing skin-to-skin, and the research is clear that paternal skin-to-skin produces the same oxytocin cascade and the same regulatory benefits, there is an added layer. It accelerates the formation of paternal attachment in ways that holding a clothed baby does not. The skin contact is the shortcut the brain uses to say, "This person is mine to protect." You didn't learn this. You felt it. And every feeling you had was neurochemically correct. At some point, every new parent has caught themselves talking to their baby in a voice they've never used with another adult in their life. Higher pitch, slower pace, drawn-out vowels, exaggerated emotional expression, simplified words, lots of repetition. And at some point, someone, a relative, a stranger, a well-meaning friend, has probably made them feel slightly ridiculous for it. That person was wrong. And the neuroscience is unambiguous about this. Infant-directed speech, by what researchers formally call motherese, is not baby talk in the dismissive sense. It is a precisely tuned acoustic delivery system optimized for the specific processing constraints of the developing auditory cortex and language acquisition system. Here's what the research shows. The exaggerated pitch variation in motherese makes phonemes, the individual sound units that words are built from, more acoustically distinct, and therefore easier for an immature auditory system to categorize. The slower pace gives the brain more time to process each sound before the next one arrives. The simplified vocabulary and repeated sentence structures create the kind of predictable input that statistical learning, the brain's primary mechanism for cracking the language code, runs on. Work by researchers including Patricia Kuhl at the University of Washington, whose decades of study on infant language acquisition are among the most cited in developmental psychology, has demonstrated that babies as young as 6 months are already mapping the phonetic landscape of their native language. They are doing statistical analysis on every sound they hear, building internal probability maps of which sounds belong together. Motherese accelerates this process by making the phonetic boundaries cleaner and more detectable. But here's the part that often gets left out of the motherese conversation. It's not just about language. The emotional expressiveness of infant-directed speech is doing something parallel and equally important. The exaggerated emotional contour of motherese is teaching the baby to read emotional tone in a voice, a skill that is foundational to social cognition, empathy, and emotional intelligence for the rest of their life. So the next time someone raises an eyebrow at the voice you use with your baby, you can tell them you're running a dual-track neurodevelopmental intervention. Or you can just smile and keep going. Either works. We're halfway through, and if what you've heard so far has made you feel something, a kind of quiet relief maybe, or a recognition of something you already knew but never had words for, then you know what to do. That like button is right there, and it genuinely helps this content reach parents who need to hear it. And what's coming in the second half of this video? It gets deeper. We're going to get into mirroring, the instinct that is doing something so cognitively sophisticated in your baby's brain that neuroscientists spent years arguing about whether it was even real. And we're going to talk about the one thing parents do when they think nobody's watching. That turns out to be one of the most important developmental inputs a child can receive. Subscribe if you want to stay in this world, because this is what we do here every week. In the early 1990s, a team of Italian neuroscientists led by Giacomo Rizzolatti at the University of Parma were studying motor neurons in macaque monkeys when they noticed something that didn't fit their model. Neurons that fired when a monkey performed an action, reaching for a peanut, for instance, also fired when the monkey simply watched another individual perform the same action. The monkey's brain was simulating the observed action as if it were doing it itself. They had discovered mirror neurons, and the implications for human development turned out to be enormous. In humans, the mirror neuron system is distributed across multiple brain regions, including the premotor cortex and the inferior parietal lobule. It activates when we perform actions, when we observe actions, and critically, when we observe emotional expressions. When you make a face at your baby and your baby makes it back, both of your mirror neuron systems are firing. You are not just exchanging expressions. You are sharing neural states. What this means for development is profound. Every time you mirror your baby's expression, and every time your baby mirrors yours, they are building an internal simulation library of emotional states. They are learning what it feels like to be in a state by watching you be in it. This is the neurological foundation of empathy, not the concept of empathy, the actual neural architecture of it, being constructed face by face, expression by expression, in the first months of life. Andrew Meltzoff at the University of Washington has documented that newborns, hours old, can imitate facial expressions, not after weeks of practice, hours. The capacity for facial mirroring appears to be present at birth, suggesting it is a hardwired social learning mechanism, not an acquired skill. When you lean over your baby and make a ridiculous face and they make it back, you are not playing. You are conducting one of the most sophisticated social neuroscience experiments in existence. You just happen to be doing it in a onesie at 2 a.m. Be honest with yourself. How many of you have spent a full 10 minutes just making faces back and forth with your baby, completely losing track of time? Tell me in the comments, because that wasn't wasted time. That was some of the best developmental work you've ever done. There's something parents do, often without realizing it's a thing, that researchers have taken to calling sportscasting. You narrate what's happening. Now we're putting on your shoes. First the left one. There it goes. Now the right. The dog is drinking water. See how she laps it up? You're frustrated because the block won't fit. That's okay. Let's try turning it. It can feel like talking to yourself, like you're filling silence, like maybe you're slightly losing your mind. You are, in fact, doing something remarkable. The research on language environment and cognitive development is some of the most replicated in the field. Work building on the foundational Hart and Risley studies of the 1990s has consistently shown that the quantity and quality of language a child hears in the first 3 years of life has measurable effects on vocabulary size, reading comprehension, and academic trajectory years later. But the more nuanced finding, and the one that matters more for how you actually talk to your child, is about conversational turns, not just word count. Research from the MIT McGovern Institute for Brain Research found that the number of conversational turns, back and forth exchanges between parent and child, even when the child's contribution is just a babble or a point, was more predictive of language development and Broca's area activation than total word count alone. It's not about talking at your child. It's about talking with them even before they can talk back. Sportscasting does both. It provides rich vocabulary and context, not flashcards, not drills, but words attached to real objects and real events happening in real time. And it invites the child into a conversational structure by leaving pauses, by responding to their reactions, by treating their babbles and points as legitimate contributions to a dialogue. You were doing this because it felt natural, because silence felt wrong, because something in you understood that this small person needed to hear the world described. That instinct was correct, and the neuroscience caught up to it eventually. There is a debate that has followed parenting culture for decades, and I want to step into it carefully, because the neuroscience here is real. The stakes are real, and there are a lot of strong feelings on all sides. The instinct: when your baby cries, you feel a physical compulsion to go to them. Not a preference, a compulsion. Your heart rate elevates. Your attention narrows. Your body moves before your mind decides. For many parents, especially mothers, the sound of their own baby's cry produces measurable physiological responses, changes in blood flow, hormonal shifts, activation of brain regions associated with motivation and action. You are not being oversensitive. You are being a mammal. The neuroscience of what happens when that cry is consistently answered is clear and well established. Developmental research, including work building on John Bowlby's attachment theory and Mary Ainsworth's strange situations studies, has documented that consistent sensitive responsiveness to infant distress is the primary driver of secure attachment. And secure attachment, as measured in infancy, predicts outcomes across the lifespan: emotional regulation, social competence, academic resilience, relationship quality in adulthood. What happens neurologically when a baby cries and no response comes is equally documented. Prolonged, unresolved stress in infancy, elevated cortisol over extended periods, affects the development of the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, regions critical for memory, learning, and executive function. The stress response system, when repeatedly activated without resolution, can become calibrated toward hypervigilance. The baby learns at a neurological level that the world does not respond. Now, and I want to be clear about this because the comments section deserves honesty. This is not a claim that any single unanswered cry causes harm. Context matters enormously. Caregiver well-being matters. Sustainable responsiveness over time matters more than perfect responsiveness in any given moment. The research is about patterns, not perfection. But the instinct to go, the instinct to respond, that instinct is not weakness, and it is not spoiling. It is one of the most neurologically consequential things you do as a parent. Trust it. This is the one I promised you at the beginning. The instinct that parents most often dismiss as just being silly. The one that turns out to be doing something extraordinarily complex in the developing brain. Play, specifically the back and forth kind. The kind where your baby does something, bangs a cup, points at something, makes a sound, and you respond, and they respond to your response. And it goes back and forth in this fluid, improvised, joyful exchange that has no agenda and no endpoint. The Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University has given this a name: serve and return interaction. The baby serves, initiates a bid for connection through sound, gesture, expression, or action. The parent returns, responds in a way that acknowledges and builds on the bid. The baby serves again. the return comes back. What this exchange is doing inside the infant brain is nothing short of architectural. Each serve and return cycle activates and strengthens neural connections in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for executive function, impulse control, and decision-making. It builds the circuits that govern social cognition. It teaches the brain the fundamental grammar of human interaction. I do something, the world responds. I respond to the response. That is the template on which all future relationships, communication, and collaborative thinking will be built. The Harvard research is unambiguous. Disrupted serve and return interaction through chronic stress, depression, distraction, or neglect is associated with measurable differences in brain architecture. Not because any individual moment of distraction causes harm, but because the pattern of interaction over time shapes the developing neural landscape. But here is what I want you to hold on to. You do not need to be a perfect serve and return partner. You need to be a present one. Research on rupture and repair, the moments when connection breaks and then is reestablished, shows that these repairs are themselves developmental. When you get distracted and then come back, when you miss a cue and then catch it, when you're tired and then re-engage, you are teaching your child that disconnection is not permanent, that the world repairs itself, that relationships survive imperfection. The silliness is the point. The laughter is the point. The moment where you're both completely absorbed in a game that means nothing and everything, that is not a break from development. That is development. If you've made it this far, you're not just a parent looking for reassurance. You're someone who genuinely wants to understand the science behind the love. And that matters. Because understanding why something works makes you more likely to keep doing it, especially on the hard days when nothing feels like enough. We go this deep every week. If this is the kind of content that makes you feel more capable and more curious about the small human you're raising, subscribing is how you stay in it. We've saved the quietest one for last, not the most dramatic, not the most immediately obvious, but in some ways, the most foundational of all. Eye contact, the simple act of looking at your baby and letting them look back, turns out to be one of the most neurologically active exchanges two human beings can have. Research from Cambridge University, led by Vasu Reddy and colleagues using EEG technology, has demonstrated that when a parent and infant engage in mutual gaze, both looking at each other at the same time, their brainwaves synchronize, not metaphorically, measurably. The neural oscillations of two separate brains begin to move in coordinated patterns. This phenomenon, called neural coupling or brain-to-brain synchrony, is associated with enhanced communication, emotional attunement, and learning. What mutual gaze does for the infant specifically is activate the social brain network, including the superior temporal sulcus, the fusiform face area, and prefrontal regions associated with theory of mind. The ability to understand that other people have inner states, intentions, and perspectives different from your own. This is not a skill that emerges at age 4 or 5. The neural foundations of it are being laid in every sustained moment of eye contact in the first year of life. There is also a dopamine dimension to this that is worth understanding. Mutual gaze triggers dopamine release in both parties. Dopamine is the brain's signal for "this matters, pay attention, do this again." Every time your baby locks eyes with you and you hold that gaze, you are both reinforcing the neural pathways associated with social reward. You are teaching the brain that human connection is worth seeking, that other eyes are interesting, that being seen feels good. In a world that increasingly competes for your baby's visual attention with screens and lights and movement, the still, quiet, mutual gaze of a parent and child is not passive. It is an active neurological event. It is building the architecture of every relationship your child will ever have. You didn't need a neuroscientist to tell you to look at your baby. You did it because you couldn't help it, because their eyes pulled yours in like gravity. That pull was not random. That pull was evolution's way of ensuring that the most important developmental input a baby can receive, the experience of being truly seen by another person, would happen automatically, instinctively, without any instruction at all. Share this with a parent who's been second-guessing themselves, because this is the thing I wish someone had said out loud earlier. You were not guessing. You were not fumbling. You were running ancient, elegant, neurologically precise software, and it was working exactly as designed. Every instinct this video named, the rocking, the singing, the gaze, the silliness, was already inside you before you knew a single word of neuroscience. The science didn't create these instincts. It just finally caught up to what your body already knew. Thanks for watching. The end screen has more videos in the same world. Thanks for being here. Pick whichever video on the end screen calls to you.